guys, today it is time for my January wrap-up. So I am filming this a little bit early. It is actually the 25th today because I am going on a holiday and I just kind of wanted to wrap everything up before I leave for that. So I might end up finishing 1 or 2 more books, but honestly, knowing myself, I'm probably not gonna read a lot on that kind of holiday. So who knows? But if I do, I will just include that in my February wrap-up. But for today, I just thought I'd wrap up everything that I've read so far this month because it's actually already quite a lot. I just really kind of tried to make reading a priority this month, and I now have a beautiful armchair in my flat. So that means obviously my reading time increases because it's just comfortable and great. Let's just get into it because it's much. So first I read Zodiac Star Force. This is a graphic novel and I thought it was a standalone, but I have now heard that there is gonna be a volume 2. I do have to say I didn't quite enjoy this. I know many people love it, but I just wasn't the biggest fan of it. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I just thought that it was enjoyable and the characters were nice, but I just don't really think the story was interesting. I also really loved the art, but many people compare this to Sailor Moon. I would say it's a fucking ripoff. I'm sorry, it is Sailor Moon. It is literally called Zodiac Star Force. They all kind of have a zodiac sign that is their alter ego. I don't know if you know a bit about like Sailor Moon stuff. It's also related to the zodiacs. Even the characters and the different ways they are behaving and what's kind of their best known traits reminded me a lot of Sailor Moon. The villains were like Sailor Moon. I just didn't find anything unique about it except for, thank God, diversity, which is obviously always great. You know, I'm all for a more diverse Sailor Moon and I'm really happy that there is a volume 2. I'm just not really thinking I will continue because I just didn't find it unique or super amazing in any way. Next, I finished the audiobook of A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. This was obviously a reread, but this was the first time that I listened to the audiobook. It's no surprise that I loved it, but it's also just so painful and it does not get less painful if you read it again. I can't believe that it's now less than a month until we get the final book in this trilogy. It's fucking killing me. I do have to say I really enjoyed both narrators for the audiobook and listening to it was just a really great experience. And then I finished my reread of Bitter Blue by Christine Cashore and this was just also so absolutely wonderful. Every single page of this I loved so much. I did a super detailed Goodreads review because I just had so many thoughts on this that I kind of wanted to get out there. So if you're interested in that, I will link the review down below. It is slow paced. Not a lot of things are happening. Not a lot of new stuff is introduced in this final book, but I just love everything about it. And then I read The Search for Eveline by Stephanie Rabick and Angie B. I actually did a full video review on this. I have to say I really enjoyed it overall. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. There was lots of queer representation in it. I just felt like overall it definitely suffered a bit from like no structure whatsoever. It felt a little bit all over the place. But yeah, if you want to hear more detailed thoughts on what I liked and didn't like about it, definitely check out my review. Next, I read The Jewel by Amy Ewing, and this is the first book in the Lone City trilogy. I have to say, while overall it was definitely an enjoyable and really fast-paced read, it was problematic in so many ways, and this is another one that I wrote a very detailed Goodreads review for because I just had too many thoughts on this. The concept of it is super interesting. That's also why I really enjoyed the first like 50% of the book because they kind of really concentrated on the world, but everything after that was very focused on the stupid main character and the stupid romance in this book. Oh my god, honestly, one of the worst YA dystopian romances I have ever read. And if you read a lot of YA dystopian, that says a lot because like few of these romances are actually good, but this one was definitely one of the worst. I didn't enjoy it whatsoever. I don't know, many things about this really were annoying to me, but still I kind of felt really intrigued by it. It's worth it for the concept, I feel like, and especially as a woman, especially as someone who is able to have children, it is a very uncomfortable read, but that is what it is supposed to be. I gave it 2 stars initially, but I'm gonna get later onto my thoughts of the second and third book. And after reading the second book, I actually bumped up my rating to 3 stars because I felt like the second book was way weaker in comparison. And then I read Garnet's Story. This is, is that how you pronounce the name even? I don't know. This is a novella that belongs to the Lone City trilogy. I have to say the novella overall wasn't like anything special. I read a lot of novellas, so this didn't really stand out in any way, but I just love this character so much, and so I was so happy to read more about him, to find out more about him, to see all of these things from his perspective. I think it's not an important novella. It's not something that I would necessarily recommend, but if you like the character, it's fine read. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill, and I decided to not give this book a rating. This is a YA dystopian standalone that is very different than any other dystopian I have ever read. I guess it comes close to The Handmaid's Tale. I haven't read that, but I heard a lot of people say that it's very close to that. I couldn't give this a rating because I rate my books on a enjoyment scale. And this book wasn't enjoyable, but that doesn't mean that it is a bad book. It was such a hard read. It is a really extreme portrayal of today's society and society's views of women. It's just a punch in the face. And I'm a very privileged woman. Still, this kind of made you think about a lot of things, and I don't know, it just really was an intense read. Let's get on to something else. Just gave me happy thoughts, and that is the novella Winter Snow by Carrie Hope Fletcher. This is a novella for this beautiful book On the Other Side, and it is from the point of view of the character Vincent. As I said before when I talked about Garnet's story, I read a lot of novellas, so at this point it is really hard to satisfy me. I have just really high expectations when it comes to novellas, and I just felt like this one was just okay. Gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was enjoyable. I just felt like it didn't give us much new insight. We didn't learn anything new about this character, but it was just kind of great to dive back into this world and to get back to kind of these characters. It just made me happy. Quick interruption. It is a few hours after I filmed this initial wrap up, but I was not too far away from finishing another book, and so I just thought I would include it, and that is the 3rd book in the Lone City trilogy. And I also, obviously, because I haven't talked about it yet, read the 2nd book this month. I mean, as I already said when I talked about The Jewel, I really didn't enjoy the 2nd book. The 2nd book was just boring. It was just so boring. Like, this was the perfect example for 2nd book syndrome. In general, the idea it had, it was definitely interesting, but I just felt like everything in this could have been condensed into 50 pages. So I gave The White Rose 2 out of 5 stars, and then The Black Key, I'm not sure if it was my favorite. The thing is, as I said, I enjoyed The Jewel for its world building. The final book I enjoyed just for its pacing. I just enjoyed both of them for very different reasons, but especially looking at my initial rating of the 1st book, I think I would probably give that more of a 2.5 stars, and the 3rd one would be 3 stars. There's lots of negative things I could say about this trilogy, but overall it was still kind of enjoyable, and it's just really a trilogy that is kind of fast-paced, that you can get through. Even the 2nd book that kind of dragged was just really easy to read through, and I read all of these in like no time. I think overall there were lots of parallels to the Hunger Games. It definitely felt like it copied lots of the themes from the Hunger Games trilogy. There were so many problematic things in the 1st book. I never really connected with any of the characters except for one. I also just absolutely hated the romance in this one. I just didn't have any feelings towards the characters and towards the feelings they had for each other. This was actually one of the first times, I want to say, where not only did I not really feel anything for the romance, but I actually shipped the main character with somebody else. And this doesn't even have a love triangle in any way, but there was just another character that I really would have loved the main character to end up with. I definitely like that the author wasn't scared to have people die in this trilogy, because it is a dystopian trilogy and people die when it's like something revolutionary. But this is another one, like I didn't care for any of the deaths. Like I was just like, eh, and just carried on reading. And I'm an emotional reader, so that's very unusual for me. Other things were just that there were some plot holes, some things in the world building and the overall storyline that didn't really make any sense. Sometimes just things the characters did and said didn't make any sense. Like the main character kind of, you know, was like accusing the villain of being a murderer, which they are a murderer. She's like, I'm better than you are because like I'm not murdering you, when literally like her friend just murdered someone like 5 minutes ago. I have a lot of thoughts on this trilogy, but overall I do have to say I am really glad that I decided to read all 3 of these books. I still feel like it was absolutely worth it just for the world building. I'm still really intrigued by the world, and I do have to say, while sometimes I was a little bit annoyed, there was a fantasy element in it that was also just really interesting, and it definitely was in some ways, while it had these parallels to other dystopian trilogies, in other ways it was a completely unique dystopian trilogy. I can definitely see why lots of people love this, and in no way would I not necessarily recommend this if you like dystopian. I just think it follows a very basic dystopian theme, and I think if you just enjoy dystopian in general and kind of the general basic main characters and storylines that come with it, this is definitely a trilogy that is worth checking out. I am still fascinated with the world building and the idea, and it is a very shocking, uncomfortable idea. These were all of the books that I read in January. As I said, quite a lot of books, but yeah, I mean, 2 of them were novellas, and 1 of them was an audiobook, and 1 of them was a graphic novel. But still, I'm so happy that I was able to start this year in such a successful way. Let me know how your January went. Did you read a lot as well, or did you kind of just start into the year in a more relaxing way? And thank you so much for watching. I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!